Ladies and gentlemen, almost 3. It won't take as long as it did the first time, so. Mr. Kendall shared a story about his childhood being some type of injustice. I think it's only fair that I'd be able to do the same. When I was growing up, not always had a curfew, but sometimes there was a time we were expected home. My brother's a year older than me, that is at the dairy farm now, it's taken over. And we would have a tendency to get home a little late. And sometimes we'd come up with some pretty good stories why we'd come home pretty late. And my dad had a lot of common sense. Only an 8th grade education, but he had a lot of common sense. And he could see through those stories. And we would be punished because we were held accountable for things that we did. In this case, you have to look at what we have here is credibility of witnesses. And that includes the defendant when he took the stand. You're going to get all this, so it's going to decide the facts from your observations, so I won't worry you about the detail there. You try to reconcile the conflicts if you can. And if you can't, follow the testimonies more reasonable and consistent. And use your common sense. You can believe all, part, or none of the witness testimony. You're going to have factors. Whether the testimony is reasonable and consistent. Mr. Green took the stand today. You assess his credibility. Do you really think it's reasonable that he doesn't know why he buried Mark Koster in his basement? Mr. Kendall said, oh, the state wants him to have perfect judgment. Perfect judgment? Ask yourself. He knows exactly why, and that's why he can't say it. You don't bury somebody in the basement because he commits self-defense. Has he made inconsistent statements? Absolutely. His interest, you can consider his interest in the trial, his motive, bias, and prejudice. State's Exhibit 54. It's not a pleasant picture to look at Mark on the back of his head. And Mr. Kendall said, oh, the state's amping up evidence. This is how Mark Koster was found. But the reason that's important is because the back of the head, Dr. Klein said, could be he got hit back in the head. Can't say absolutely. But the reason that's important is to show when he got hit in the head where he was bleeding. Does it matter where he got hit in the head? No. But there is an injury, or at least there's an area of the scalp that's consistent with being hit in the back of the head. Now Mr. Kendall says, well, how do we know he didn't do that when they lifted him up? Does that look like that's under his head, folks? Mr. Kendall said that actually Mark benefited by having the defendant be with him. Mark may disagree with that. Was a bat used? That's the question. Now the defendant claims the bat was used. This is what he said during his interview.
Sure, was it your bat that you owned, or did that bat you?
One that he has in the corner with
Do you know when he maybe used that bat? Was it maybe think it was for protection? Or what do you think
he was sitting in the corner with like the umbrella and so forth.
I've seen it before.
Sitting in the corner with the umbrella. What's wrong with that statement? Dan Koster told you. Mark Koster is not an umbrella guy. Never had an umbrella. Dan Koster cleaned up his house, his brother's house. Never found an umbrella there. Is that a big deal? He's coming up with a story. He wants to put a weapon in Mark Koster's hand. So he says it's back. He says it's by the umbrella. Well, if an umbrella never existed, was there ever a bat? So why would the defendant have to put a bat in Mark's hands? Because he wants Mark to be the guy that came at him. And then why would he go through the trouble, if a bat was used, to take it somewhere else? Why not put it down where you're burying everything else? Why do you go through the trouble to take it somewhere else? State's Exhibit 41. What's laying right on top of Mark Koster's hands? Table length. said, a linear object. Now, it may have been a bat, it may not have. The point being this, even with the defendant's story being a bat, he still committed murder in the first degree, and he's not doing self-defense. But perfect judgment, we're asking him to be perfect defendant? No. This story doesn't make sense. It makes no sense. The demonstration, this is what he demonstrated when he's down in March of 2014, how he demonstrated this when they asked him to use that little witness.
I guess John really like last night. I guess from my own mind here, I'd love to go through this most of the, him coming up and getting you back. I guess I'm taking that piece of wood there and let's go through it. I'd like to see.
Oh, here, I think you want to use
Just the point. Here, you're just gonna piece of wood there. I guess I'd like to go through, use a mark here as Mark Costner. I guess I'd like to. I want to go through.
Hey,
I want to understand it all.
All right, first thing, when you sit down and have it, okay, let's play it out. Let's say you're sitting on the computer. Now, okay, I'm sitting right here, okay? And that's the computer.
Pretty much that was the computer, might have been a little bit more.
And where
And
Mark
over here was like the lamp. And Mark came from, I guess, more that angle. Not directly behind him, because I was sitting more like in the corner.
So did you see him coming, or did he hit you by surprise, or what do you remember?
Just out of the corner of my eye, I heard him cussing, so I was actually watching the show. As I looked up, that come right at me. I don't know if I turned or whatever, and
Where did it hit you? Right in there. And then you got up.
I sprung up.
And I can show me here. I'm trying to make sense of all this. I just want my head here. And he hit you.
When I got up, this went over.
And we'll do that here.
He swung at me again, sort of. And the best I can say is I took him like that. And went down, hit him back, he was down like him. And I'm down there, and Mark went down.
Okay, let's say I'm Mark Costner. You said I would be laying on this and you on top of me?
No.
How would you? First, I see. See, so
When I hit up with the bat, I was on top of him.
And that's me. Okay. Okay, that's it.
thank you.
There's none of this that is showing today. Hitting him in his head going down. He got the bat away, hit him, he went down. That's what he's telling the police. With that story, that's murder in the first degree. It's not self-defense, he's on the ground. We talked about reasonable force, and that's what it comes down to. Is he using reasonable force? Absolutely not. He continued the incident. He had an alternative course of action. He didn't believe he was in imminent danger. How's he in imminent danger at 6'4", over 200 pounds, looking at a frail guy on the ground? But wait a minute, I forgot. Defendant's Exhibit C. Mark has schizophrenia. Because he has schizophrenia, apparently it's okay to knock him on the ground and strangle the life out of him. Oh wait, he has a history of violence. That's right, a history of violence. In 1990, he slapped a boy. That's the history of violence he had, folks. Do you think, and the state has the burden of proof, not the defense, but do you think if there was this history of violence, if he was attacking other people, we wouldn't have heard about it? One slap, and now he has a history of violence in 1990. But what's he doing? He's living in his home since 1998 in Sac City, minding his own business. No other police calls there. He's living, he's taking care of himself, he pays his bills. But because he has schizophrenia, oh yeah, it must be Mark that just went off on the deep end. We talked about this in opening. There's a difference between no motive and an unknown motive. And there's always unanswered questions in a case. They want you to believe because Mark had schizophrenia, somehow that he's responsible and he's the one that provoked all this. Even if you believe this story again, even if you believe you hit him in the shoulder, the amount of force used in proportion was unreasonable. Common sense. We've gone through these. This isn't about perfect judgment, folks. This is just common sense. You don't do everything the defendant did if you didn't commit a crime. He didn't call the police. He hid the body. If it's self-defense, you don't need to do that. You don't need to get rid of the murder weapon. You don't need to clean up a crime scene. If it is truly just shock and you don't know what to do, you just leave. And then after you have time to kind of think about it, you can always call the police. You don't go through all this elaborate planning. Planning, when I say planning, I'm misspeaking, all this elaborate getting rid of. Because planning is incorrect. As we talked about, premeditation is time to think. The state's not arguing that the defendant woke up that morning and said, I'm going to kill Mark Costa. But when he placed that bat on his throat, oh yeah. If it's self-defense, you don't need to keep it a secret. You know, Mr. Kendall says, okay, they got him early, it's at the, down in the parking lot. So apparently he's not awake yet, so when he gets to the police department, you can't hold it against him, ladies and gentlemen. You just can't hold it against him because he's kind of getting his wits, trying to figure out what's going on. So then why, when they ask this question, does he say this?
So, like I said, our investigation is very clear. Doesn't tell me what happened. Something happened between you two. Did Mark lose it? And, you know, did he attack you when something happened? What happened?
It's hard to hear. He said, what do you think happened? Common sense. Why are you saying that, right? You got your wits about you at this point. Because again, he's playing the game, folks. Wants to know, what did they know? Who do they know? What can I say? I can't say a story until I know what they have. It's not self-defense. Here's the other clip about, why don't you tell me about the evidence?
Something happened. Did he also lose it? And you guys had a fight, and did you guys actually get a fight, and you know, pushed him, he fell, hit his head? I mean, I don't know what happened. It's like I said, the evidence doesn't lie. I mean, what?
Yeah, it's hard to hear. What he's saying is, why don't you tell me about the evidence? Common sense. Self-defense, why do you need the police to tell you about the evidence? You tell them. Because it is. It's clear. Defendant's story is not reasonable. It makes no sense because it's not self-defense. It's murder. And we're going to go through why it's murder, not manslaughter. What caused the bleeding? Remember the defendant said in the interview and today he said it was his right hand that was bleeding? And saw the defendant demonstrate down in Florida how it happened. And he takes the bat, he hits Mark goes to the ground, and then he gets on top of him and strangles him. So where's the bleeding on the hand? Was it when the defendant was holding the bat on Mark Koster's throat, crushing the life out of him? Was Mark Koster scratching at his hand, trying to get the hands off the bat or whatever weapon he was using on his throat? That makes sense. Makes no sense grabbing a bat, hitting somebody, and getting on top of them. Your hand should ever be bleeding. He wasn't going to let up. He had no reason to let up until he finished the job. We'll talk about beyond a reasonable doubt. Before we do that, I just want to cover a couple others. The paying rent, folks, use your own judgment. Paying rent or not. It's not a big point, but the fact is Sandra Dierenfeld told you when she testified that Mark told her that he had stayed with the defendant down in Texas, so he's returning the favor. He comes up, he's unemployed, he has no job. So if you want to believe he's paying $150, it doesn't matter. But it goes to his credibility. It's an issue. Mr. Kendall said there's a higher prediction of being violent. That's what Dr. Konar said. If you have a history of violence, not taking medication, drug and alcohol abuse, no evidence in the record of drug and alcohol abuse, and one slapping of a 7-year-old. That's it. So they want to make that a higher prediction of being violent. From 1990 to 2009, nothing else. Mark was living on his own. He liked to be by himself. He had a few friends. He associated with his neighbor. It doesn't, just because he has a diagnosis of schizophrenia, doesn't mean he could be attacked. Now when you get to beyond a reasonable doubt instruction, you go back to the one thing on the instruction, there talks about hesitation. And sometimes people start asking about hesitation. But when you get instruction number 39 of your jury instructions, when you take that back, just so you, I'm just going to read the first line. I think I had 38 on there, it's actually 39. In that instruction, it will say, in the third paragraph, during your deliberations, do not hesitate to re-examine your view and change your opinion if convinced it's wrong. So when the hesitation language is used in beyond a reasonable doubt, doesn't mean you have to go back and everybody decide without talking about it. Because that's what deliberation's about. You're going to go back and talk and discuss things. When the bottom line, reasonable doubt, means if you're firmly convinced. That's what it means. Mr. Kenville said the defendant was running from stress and he didn't start it. The defendant finished it. We talked about the difference between no motive and unknown motive. You know, the mental health records, you know, they were blame law enforcement didn't have these in their interview. You heard the interview down in Florida. They were talking. They interviewed family. They talked to people they knew. Mark was schizophrenic. It wasn't like they had no idea. This wasn't a new revelation to them. They just didn't have the records. Minor inconsistencies. He said the state wants you to hold the defendant, hold it against him for having minor inconsistencies. You use your judgment if you think those were minor inconsistencies. Truth doesn't change, folks. Shouldn't keep changing in how this all happens to what we saw today in the court. The truth's the truth. Should happen one way. Mr. Kendall said then that the defendant just put him in the basement. It's just a little more than just putting him in the basement. Remember, anything's possible, but is it reasonable? You start with murder in the first degree, how it works, and if you don't believe the state proved murder in the first degree, you go to second, and then you go to, if you don't believe the state proved that, then you go to voluntary manslaughter. I want to talk about voluntary manslaughter only because Mr. Kendall raised that issue in his closing. You're going to get the instruction that says the strangling was done solely by the reason of sudden, violent, and irresistible passion resulting from serious provocation. Okay, that's part of it. Serious provocation is conduct that would cause a reasonable person to have sudden, violent, and irresistible passion. So the first question is there a sudden strangling done solely by the reason of sudden, violent, and irresistible passion? The defendant's story, the story that he told the police, is he gets hit in the shoulder. If you want to believe that that's done in the heat of passion somehow, maybe the first knockdown you can argue, you react, like in law school, a lot of times they have the heat of passion. They talk about if somebody comes in and their spouse is in bed and there's a weapon there and they grab it, they immediately react. Maybe the first knockdown you can argue heat of passion. But once you decide to get on top of somebody and put them back there and strangle them, that's no longer heat of passion. That's malice aforethought. Let's talk about that. He knocked him to the ground. Again, he could have just left, folks. Once he knocked Mark to the ground, he had a bat in his hand. He's 6'4", over 200 pounds. He had a car. He could just say, I'm out of here. But he didn't. This is what he said, what Mark Koster was doing when he held the bat.
Was he saying anything when he marked out with him?
Right, like the runner say, you know, the arrows, or whatever.
Were you saying anything to him, or?
Or not. Say anything during a fight, you know.
He just grunt.
It was just grunting, which makes sense. Hard to talk when something's on your windpipe. We talked about malice and forethought. Just remember, it doesn't have to be done out of actual hatred. It can be or with evil or unlawful purpose. In this case, it was done, there is malice and forethought. It was done with an unlawful purpose. Because he's not justified doing what he did. So now we look at it, did he do it with the fixed purpose or design to do physical harm? It doesn't have to exist or any complaint. Folks, this is really what it comes down to. And think about it. The defendant's story is he knocks Mark to the ground and then he gets on top of him. Does he put the bat on his chest? Does he throw the bat to the side? Big guy with big hands hold him down and say, okay, Mark, that's enough. Does he give him a bear hug? He puts the bat on the throat. Ask yourselves, why would somebody put a bat on someone's throat and hold it there? Fixed purpose or design to do harm. That's why you try to strangle somebody. You don't strangle somebody for fun. You do it with a fixed purpose or design to do harm. And that's what he did. He didn't let up. He didn't let up when Mark's grunting and say, all right, that's enough. He never stopped. Because he did stop. He stopped when Mark stopped breathing. This is not a murder, because once you have malice or forethought, it's either murder first or murder second. So the only question comes down to, for murder second, there's just three elements. So we're going to go through the murder first. For whatever reason, if you don't believe the state proved murder first, clearly the state proved the defendant acted with malice or forethought and he wasn't justified. So it's murder second. But the defendant did commit murder in first degree. That's the fourth element, acted willfully. We can talk about this premeditation, specific intent to kill. We'll buzz ahead of these, because you've seen these terms already. Specific intent to kill. Now, Mr. Kendall said, well, wait a minute. State's amping up evidence here because of the 2 minutes. Whose words were those? You saw the video clip. I understand the defendant didn't have a stopwatch and he wasn't timing it. But the defendant said it seemed like an eternity. He didn't say it was really quick. And the defendant said, he said approximately 2 minutes. Why that's interesting is, what did Dr. Thompson tell you in general? Dr. Thompson said some people can hold their breath longer than others, but he said in general, 2 minutes. They're both consistent. And I understand it's not to the exact second, but when you think about how long is 2 minutes? Let's start the clock now. And as this is going for the 2 minutes, since Mark Koster wasn't saying anything, the bat is being exerted on his windpipe. That's only 14 seconds. He's still holding, still grunting. 20 seconds now. And the point being with this is, defendant holding this down, he's clearly angry. He doesn't want to admit he was angry. You're not going to be happy. He's angry. He's holding his bat against his throat. And he's still holding it there. He's not letting up. We're only at 38 seconds. He's still there. He's still forcing it down. It's not at any point does he give Mark a chance to get up. Mark is probably, based on the evidence of his bleeding on the hand, it's consistent that he is fighting for his life. It's consistent he's trying to get the defendant's hands off the bat, or whatever weapon he used. That's only a minute. That's a minute. And he's still there. And it's still going on. That's a long time. You can stop it here. You can say that Mr. Kendall can say that the state's making it up, but that's not the number the state threw out there. That was the number the defendant said. That was the number Dr. Thompson said. And when you don't say it seems like an eternity when it was quick. The reason that's important is specific intent to kill. That's why you do that. That's why somebody would hold a bat against somebody's, or whatever he used, against somebody's throat for that long. You're intending to kill him. When did he stop? When did he let up? When Mark no longer was alive. It goes back to actions speak louder than words, ladies and gentlemen. And the defendant's actions do speak louder than words. Look at these actions, ladies and gentlemen, and ask yourselves, are these actions consistent with someone acting in self-defense, or consistent with somebody who killed somebody, murdered, theft? Now they had a picture the defense offered in of Mark Koster's defendant's Exhibit A, and a lot of us like our driver's license picture because apparently that makes us look a little different. So you have that picture. But you also have a picture of Mark when he was in Texas. You don't get a picture to see. The state's not saying Mark Koster did not have schizophrenia. He did. He was diagnosed with that. But that's not justification for the defendant to knock him down, get on top of him, put a bat on his throat, and strike him the life out. The state is asking you to come back with a first-degree murder conviction. Thank you.